Three powerful voices, one stage. The room was silent before the event even began. Thousands of people had gathered in the grand hall, waiting for something they knew was historic but could not fully understand yet. The stage was simple but glowing with soft lights. 3 chairs stood in the center, each empty but heavy with meaning. People whispered. Cameras were ready, and hearts beat faster with the thought of what was about to happen. In that silence, the first figure entered. It was Modi, his steps calm but filled with purpose. His eyes scanned the audience, and he lifted his hand gently as if greeting every soul in the hall. His presence carried both warmth and strength, the kind of energy that made people lean forward, ready to listen. He sat on the first chair, straight-backed, his face calm yet full of thought. A moment later, the atmosphere shifted. Donald Trump walked in. His expression was firm, his movement strong, and his presence louder than the silence around him. He looked at the crowd with a mixture of pride and challenge, as if daring them to judge him, but also demanding their attention. He sat on the second chair, folding his hands, his eyes scanning the audience with intensity. Then, quietly, almost humbly, Sundar Pichai entered. He was not loud. He was not demanding. Yet his presence carried a deep calm, like a river that could not be shaken by storms. People clapped softly as if recognizing his humility. He sat in the third chair, his hands folded gently, his eyes kind but focused. 3 different men, 3 different journeys. One stage, the whispers grew louder. People wondered what would happen when voices so powerful, so different, would speak together. There was excitement but also fear. What if their differences led to conflict right in front of the world? What if pride destroyed respect? What if silence broke into chaos? A moderator stood at the side, almost nervous. He welcomed the audience, but his words were short. He knew everyone had come for the 3 men on stage, not for him. He asked the first question, his voice trembling slightly. What does power mean to each of you? The hall waited. Modi leaned forward first. His voice was steady, filled with the weight of experience. Power, he said, is not in holding people down. Power is in lifting them up. Power is when the weakest person feels stronger because of your presence. His words echoed softly, and the crowd nodded, many whispering in agreement. Then Trump leaned forward. His tone was sharp, his words fast. Power is about strength. It is about never backing down. It is about making sure your people know you will fight for them no matter what. Some in the crowd clapped loudly, others remained quiet, unsure how to react. The hall felt divided, pulled between strength and humility. Pichai looked at both men, then at the audience. His voice was soft, but it carried far. Power is not about what we take, but what we give. It is when knowledge is shared freely. It is when a child from a small village can dream without fear because opportunities reach him. Power is in kindness that does not need to be announced. The hall fell into deep silence. His words touched hearts like a quiet wave reaching every corner. The 3 voices had spoken, each with its own truth. Conflict was clear, but so was respect. They did not interrupt each other. They did not argue. They let the audience feel the difference. And in that difference, there was suspense. People leaned in, waiting for what would come next. Would these men clash, or would they find a way to stand together? Modi turned to Trump, his eyes steady. Strength is needed, he said, but strength without compassion can become dangerous. Trump looked back, almost ready to respond sharply, but then paused. The silence pressed against him, and for the first time, he chose to wait. Pichai's calm presence between them was like a bridge. Neither man wanted to break. The audience held their breath. The stage was no longer just a stage. It had become a mirror of the world, showing the balance between pride, strength, and humility. People could feel history forming in that very moment, not through speeches alone, but through the silent respect shared in the pauses. The first part of the dialogue had ended, but hearts were racing. Everyone knew this was only the beginning, and deep inside they sensed that what was about to unfold would not just be a talk. It would be a story of power, respect, and humanity. Voices begin to clash. The hall stayed silent after the first answers, but that silence was heavy. People were not only listening, they were waiting for sparks. They knew three men so different could not sit together without tension rising sooner or later. The moderator shifted nervously, sensing that the real heat was about to begin. He cleared his throat and asked, "How should leaders face the anger of people when decisions go wrong?" The crowd leaned forward. Everyone knew this question would test them. It was not about dreams, not about visions, but about mistakes and failures, the kind of topic that pulled out truth from behind polished words. Modi spoke first, his face calm but serious. "A leader must face anger with patience," he said. "When people are upset, they must know their voice is being heard. Anger is not always a problem. It is often a cry for justice. If you listen, you can find the truth hidden in that anger." His words were slow, steady, like stones being placed one by one to build a bridge. Trump shifted in his chair, shaking his head slightly. His voice was louder. "You cannot just sit and listen to anger. If people are angry, it means they are being led the wrong way. A leader must show strength, must push back. If you let anger control you, you lose respect. Respect comes when you show people you will not bend to the crowd." His words hit like waves, crashing into the calm that Modi had set. Some in the crowd clapped, others frowned. The division grew stronger. Then Pichai spoke. His voice was gentle but firm. "Anger is real," he said, "but it often hides fear. People are afraid of losing their jobs, afraid of losing their homes, afraid of being forgotten. When a leader sees the fear behind the anger, solutions become possible. Technology, education, and kindness can take away fear. Without fear, anger loses its power." The hall grew quiet again. His words did not strike like Trump's, nor build slowly like Modi's. They floated like air, entering quietly but staying in people's minds. The three answers stood before the crowd, each strong in its own way. And for the first time, their differences started to clash. Modi turned slightly to Trump. "Strength is not the same as respect," he said. "Respect grows when you show people you care." Trump leaned back, crossing his arms. "Care without strength is weakness," he shot back. "If you are too soft, people will walk over you." His tone carried both frustration and pride. The audience tensed. They could feel conflict rising, sharp and real. The stage was no longer calm. The air carried weight, as if something could break at any moment. But then Pichai leaned forward. His hands folded gently, his voice steady. "Both of you are right," he said softly. "Strength is needed, but so is compassion. When strength and care walk together, they are unstoppable. If one stands alone, it will fail." His words slowed the clash, almost like water calming fire. The audience breathed again. The moment of tension had softened, but it was not gone. People could feel that under the respect, a storm was waiting. Each man had his own truth, his own pride. Sooner or later, those truths would collide again. A child in the audience, sitting beside his father, whispered, "They sound like they are fighting, but also like they are teaching." His father nodded quietly because that was exactly what it was. It was conflict, but it was also learning. It was power, but it was also humility. And no one knew which side would win. The moderator smiled nervously, trying to move forward. "Thank you," he said, "but let us ask the deeper question. What happens when power is tested by loss, when everything you built starts to fall apart?" The crowd went silent again. This question was dangerous because it forced leaders to show their hearts. And as the audience waited, they felt something powerful coming, something that would test not only the men on stage, but the meaning of leadership itself. The weight of loss, the hall grew still when the moderator asked about loss. It was no longer about power or anger. It was about the human side of leadership. People leaned in, hearts tight, waiting to hear how three men who carried such power would speak about pain. Modi breathed slowly before answering. His voice was calm but carried a shadow of memory. "Loss is the hardest teacher," he said. "I lost my father when I was young. I saw my mother struggle to keep the family alive. Those moments carved my strength. When leaders lose, they must not hide it. They must show that pain can be turned into courage. His eyes softened, and for a moment the hall felt his past. The audience sat silent, moved by the honesty. Then Trump leaned forward, his tone sharper, almost defensive. "Loss is part of life," he said, "but you don't let it break you. When I faced failures in business, people said I was finished. But I stood up, I rebuilt, I fought back harder. The world respects only those who refuse to stay down. Loss should make you tougher, not weaker." His words drew claps from some, but they also drew quiet unease from others. His answer was powerful, but it carried no softness. Pichai lowered his eyes for a moment, as if remembering something deep. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Loss changes you," he said. "When I left India for the first time, I felt like I was losing a part of myself. I missed my family, I missed the small streets where I grew up, but that loss gave me understanding. I realized millions of people live with separation, struggle, and emptiness. Loss should make us more humble, not only stronger. It should remind us to care more for others, because everyone carries pain inside them." The words spread through the hall like a wave, soft but unstoppable. Many in the audience wiped their eyes. Even those who had clapped for Trump now sat in silence, feeling something deeper. For the first time, the three men seemed to sit closer in spirit. Their answers were different, but the weight of loss had touched each of them. The stage felt less like a debate and more like a mirror of human struggle. Then, suddenly, a voice from the crowd broke the silence. A man stood up, his face lined with years of hardship. "Leaders," he called out, "you speak of loss, but do you understand the loss of the poor? When food is gone, when homes are lost, when children cry of hunger, do you know that pain?" The hall gasped. Security moved quickly, but Modi raised his hand to stop them. The man's voice echoed with raw truth. The air was electric. Modi looked at him and said softly, "Yes, I know that pain. I have walked among the poor. I have seen hunger up close." His eyes held steady on the man, and the hall trembled with quiet respect. Trump's face tightened. He spoke quickly, his tone firm. "I built jobs. I fought for workers. I made sure people had money in their hands. That is how I fought loss for the poor." Some clapped, others stayed silent. The tension clear. Pichai turned to the man in the crowd. His voice was gentle. "I was raised in a home where we sometimes waited for days before a phone came. I know what it means to not have much. That is why I work to make technology reach everyone, not just the rich. I want every child to feel that they can rise no matter how poor they are." The man stood frozen, tears in his eyes. He bowed slightly and sat down. The hall was silent again, but it was a silence filled with emotion. On stage, something had shifted. The three men were no longer just leaders answering questions. They were men carrying stories, losses, and dreams, and the audience could feel it. The moderator's hands trembled slightly as he moved to the next question. "If loss teaches us," he said, "then what is the greatest lesson you want to leave behind when your voices are gone?" The hall shivered. It was no longer just a question. It was a challenge to their souls. Lessons that outlive power. The hall grew colder after the moderator asked his question. It was no longer about today or tomorrow. It was about legacy. What would remain when these voices were gone? People leaned in, almost holding their breath. Modi spoke first. His voice was slow, his tone filled with memory. "When my voice is gone, I want people to remember that leadership is service. That power means nothing if it is not used to lift others. I want children to know that even if they are born poor, they can still dream. They can still rise." His words landed softly, like seeds falling into soil, waiting to grow. The audience nodded, many touched by the simplicity of his truth. Trump shifted forward, his tone louder, sharper. "When my voice is gone, I want the world to remember strength. I want them to remember a leader who never gave up, who never bent, who never backed down. Weakness destroys nations. Strength builds them. That will be my lesson." His words hit like iron against stone. The hall reacted in two ways. Half the crowd cheered, half stayed silent, unsettled. Then Pichai spoke, his voice calm but deep. "When my voice is gone, I want people to remember humility, that even the most powerful leader must walk with kindness. I want them to know that power without humanity is empty. I want them to believe in sharing knowledge because knowledge should belong to everyone, not only the few." The hall fell into silence. The three lessons, service, strength, humility, floated in the air like three different colors trying to blend. The audience could feel the conflict, but also a strange harmony. Then something unexpected happened. A young woman stood from the back rows. Her voice shook, but it carried across the hall. "You speak of lessons," she said, "but what if the world refuses to listen? What if power is louder than truth? What if your voices are forgotten?" Her words cut through the hall like lightning. People turned to see her, surprised at her boldness. Security looked uneasy, but again Modi raised his hand, stopping them. He turned to the woman. "Truth is never truly forgotten," he said. "Even if voices fade, actions remain. When you serve with honesty, history carries your story." Trump leaned in, his tone sharp. "But history is written by the strong. If you want to be remembered, you must fight. Otherwise, your truth dies with you." Pichai looked at the woman, his voice quiet but powerful. Sometimes the smallest act carries further than the loudest voice. A kind word to a stranger, a hand reaching out to the poor. These are remembered by those who felt them, even if history books stay silent. The hall grew heavy with emotion. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "Then promise," she said. "Promise you will not let your lessons fade. Promise you will show the world that power can be human." For the first time, the three men looked at one another, not as rivals, not as leaders fighting for attention, but as men bound by a single truth. They nodded slowly, each in his own way. The audience could feel it. A rare moment of unity. Three different lessons, three different voices, but one promised to leave behind something greater than themselves. Just as the crowd began to breathe again, the lights in the hall flickered. The sound system cracked. A sudden wave of unease spread across the audience. People whispered, wondering what had gone wrong. The moderator froze, unsure if it was only a technical fault or something else. The stage lights dimmed for a moment, and in that darkness, the silence felt sharper than ever. The storm outside the hall, the lights flickered again, longer this time. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. People looked around, some worried, some confused. The moderator tapped his microphone, but the sound came out broken. The hall felt uneasy, as if something was pressing against it from the outside. Suddenly, the doors at the far end burst open. A man ran in, his face pale, his voice shaking. "There is chaos outside," he shouted. "A storm has struck, buildings are damaged, and people are trapped in the streets." The hall erupted with gasps. Some people stood, others tried to rush out, but security held them back. Panic spread like fire. The moderator froze, unsure of what to do. But on the stage, the three men stood at once. Modi lifted his hand high, calling for calm. "Sit down," he said firmly, his voice carrying through the chaos. "Panic will not help anyone." His tone was steady, almost fatherly, and some of the crowd listened, sitting back slowly. Trump raised his voice next, sharp and commanding. "We need order. Listen to instructions. No one moves unless told. Chaos kills faster than storms." His words cut through the noise, and the hall grew quieter. Then Pichai stepped forward, his calm presence easing the fear. "We must act quickly," he said. "People outside need help. Resources must be directed there. We cannot only speak, we must act." The three men looked at one another. For the first time, their differences did not matter. Their voices merged with one purpose, to lead not with words, but with action. Modi turned to security. "Send teams to guide the people. Open safe exits one by one. Keep the crowd steady." Trump barked orders with sharp clarity. "Call emergency services. Bring in trucks, bring in help. Move fast. Pichai pulled out his phone, already giving directions. We can connect rescue workers with live maps. We will use technology to see where people are trapped. Information will save lives. The hall grew calmer, watching them. 3 men so different, yet now working like parts of the same body. A child in the front row clutched his mother's hand and whispered, "They are not just talking now. They are helping." The mother nodded, her eyes wet with relief. "This is the real test of leaders," she said softly. Minutes later, reports came in through phones and radios. The storm had broken windows, crushed cars, and left families stuck inside buildings. Outside the hall, fear was spreading. But inside, something else was happening. People were beginning to trust. The 3 leaders walked down from the stage into the crowd. They did not stay above. They moved among the people. Modi spoke to the frightened, telling them to hold on. Trump pointed toward exits, guiding groups firmly. Pichai showed volunteers how to use live data on their devices to find safe routes. The audience had come expecting only words, but now they saw action. 3 powerful voices had become 3 working hands. As they moved, a reporter whispered into his camera, "History is not being written in speeches tonight. It is being written in the way these men are standing together when fear could have broken everything." But just as calm began to return, another messenger rushed in, his face even more pale than the first. "Leaders," he cried out, "the storm has caused a fire in the lower streets. Many families are trapped. If we don't act fast, lives will be lost." The hall froze again. Hearts pounded. This was no longer just a test of leadership. It was a race against time. The 3 men looked at one another, and without speaking, they knew what had to be done. "Fire in the streets." The moment the messenger's words filled the hall, silence turned into urgency. People gasped, some began to cry, and fear threatened to spread again. But on the stage, the 3 men did not wait. They stepped forward with the same thought in their minds. Action. Modi raised his voice first. "We cannot stay here while families are burning in the streets. Every life matters. We must go to them." His words were steady, carrying a weight that gave people courage. Trump turned sharply to security. "Bring vehicles. Bring equipment. We are moving out now. Anyone who can help, step forward." His tone was fierce, commanding like a soldier in battle. Pichai spoke quietly but firmly. "I will guide rescue teams with live updates. Every second matters. We need maps, drones, communication lines. Connect them now." His calm words steadied the rush of panic, turning fear into purpose. The hall shifted. Men and women who had only come to listen now stood to volunteer. Some were doctors, some were students, some were just ordinary people. But together, under the guidance of the 3 men, they became a team. Outside, the streets were chaos. Flames rose from buildings, smoke filled the air, and the cries of trapped families echoed through the night. The storm had broken power lines, and the fire spread quickly. Modi stepped into the smoke, his scarf pulled across his face. He shouted instructions to volunteers, guiding them to form human chains. "Carry water, bring blankets, help the children first," he called out. His calm but firm tone gave direction where there was only confusion. Trump moved through the crowd like a commander. He ordered trucks to block spreading fire, told strong volunteers to break doors, and pushed others to clear paths for rescue. His presence was loud, demanding, and it forced people to act without hesitation. Pichai stood with a group of young men holding their phones and small devices. He connected them to real-time updates, pointing at a map. "Here," he said softly but firmly, "families are trapped in these streets. We must reach them fast. Go left, not right. The fire is spreading that way." His guidance saved time, and in a crisis, time was life. The 3 men worked differently, but their efforts joined like threads weaving a rope. Strength, service, and humility were no longer words. They were alive in action. A moment of danger came when part of a burning roof began to collapse near a group of children. Screams filled the air, Without thinking, Modi rushed forward, pulling 2 children out. Trump grabbed another by the arm and carried him through the smoke. Pichai held up a flashlight to guide them all through the falling debris. The crowd gasped, but relief filled them when the children were safe. One small boy hugged Modi tightly, tears running down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. Modi held him close, his own eyes wet. Trump set the boy he had carried onto safe ground. The boy looked up, eyes wide with fear and awe. Trump bent down and said firmly, "You are strong. Don't be afraid. You will make it." Pichai knelt beside another child, checking his breathing. "You are safe now," he said softly. "You will see your family again." Their differences were still there, 3 men from 3 different worlds, but in that moment, they were one. Hours passed as they worked side by side with volunteers. Slowly, the flames weakened. More families were rescued. The cries of despair turned into voices of relief. As dawn began to rise, the fire was finally under control. The streets were covered in smoke, but hope had returned. People hugged one another, thanking the volunteers, thanking the leaders who had stood with them. The 3 men stood together, their clothes covered in soot, their faces tired but strong. They looked at one another with respect that words could not describe. They had clashed in words before, but in action they had found something greater. The crowd gathered around them, some crying, some clapping softly. A voice from the back shouted, "You did not just speak, you saved us." And the crowd echoed with cheers, louder than any applause the hall had heard before. But deep in their eyes, the 3 men knew the test was not over. Storms end, fires die, but the fight for humanity never stops. The final promise, the smoke slowly cleared from the streets, but the memory of the fire stayed heavy in every heart. People gathered around the 3 men, not as leaders on a stage, but as fellow humans who had stood with them in danger. The night had tested them, and now morning had revealed their true strength. The moderator, his clothes wrinkled from the long hours, stepped forward with trembling hands. "You were invited here to speak," he said softly, "but you chose to act. Your voices have already gone beyond words. What will you leave for us now, after this night?" The crowd grew still again. This was no longer the hall of speeches. It had become a place of history. Modi looked at the faces before him. They were tired, but their eyes held hope. His voice was steady. "I will leave the lesson of service," he said. "Power is not in crowns or chairs, but in the way you kneel to help the weak. Let every leader, every child, every soul remember that greatness begins when you serve." The people bowed their heads, feeling his words not as politics but as truth. Trump spoke next, his voice firm, but this time it carried less pride and more weight. "I will leave the lesson of strength," he said. "Not the strength to rule over others, but the strength to rise again when you fall. Storms will come, fires will burn, but if you stand tall, others will find the courage to stand too. Never let defeat define you." His words struck the crowd like steel, but they did not divide. This time, they inspired. Pichai stepped forward, his eyes soft, his tone gentle. "I will leave the lesson of humility," he said. "Technology, wealth, and fame mean nothing if they do not touch hearts. Power is not in the loudest voice, but in the quiet act of kindness. I want every child to know that humanity is bigger than success, and kindness is stronger than pride." Tears rolled down many cheeks. People clapped softly, not in noise, but in respect. The 3 men stood side by side. Different voices, different styles, but one message. They had clashed, they had argued, but in the storm they had shown the world that power without humanity is empty, and humanity without power is weak. Only when both walk together can the world truly heal. A young boy stepped forward, holding a small notebook. His clothes were torn, his face smudged with ash, but his eyes shined with courage. "Leaders," he said, his voice shaking. "Last night I was afraid I would die. But you came. You saved us. I don't know what power means, but I know what kindness feels like. Will you promise that leaders after you will be like this too? The hall grew silent again. The question was heavier than all before. It was not about speeches, not about policies. It was about the future. Modi placed his hand gently on the boy's head. "Yes, I promise," he said. Trump nodded firmly, his voice low. "I promise too." Pichai bent down to meet the boy's eyes. "We promise together," he whispered. "And so must you and everyone here. Leadership is not only on a stage. It lives in every person who chooses kindness over cruelty." The boy smiled through his tears. The crowd clapped louder this time, not for the men alone, but for the promise made in front of them. The sun rose higher, its light falling on the faces of 3 men who had stunned the world. They had come to speak, but they had left a legacy far greater. Service, strength, and humility. 3 lessons that would live beyond them. The people began to chant softly. Not names, not power, but a single word that filled the air. Humanity. And in that chant, the story found its end. Not with crowns or victories, but with the promise that humanity will always be greater than power.